Happy Founders Day, 125 years. Pretty exciting stuff, huh? I'm Kenneth Townsend. I'm an alum of the college. I work here for the president now and teach in the political science department. I'm also temporary chair of the public events committee. If we have any faculty who are interested in chairing that committee, come talk to me afterwards and we can sort something out. This is a really special Friday Forum. In this Friday Forum, we celebrate and commemorate 125 years of Millsaps. And just give you a quick sense of what we have ahead of us. Stephanie is going to provide an overview around the time of Millsaps' founding to 1950. T.W. Lewis is going to talk to us about Millsaps from 1950 to 1975. Jim McKeown will talk to us about Millsaps from around 1975 to 2000. And then we have current student Daniel Kees, who will reflect on what it's like to be a student now and to outline some hopes for the future as well. Each presenter will speak for about 15 minutes. And then after that, we'll leave about 15 or 20 minutes for audience Q&A. That's the plan of attack. So welcome, everyone. On behalf of the Public Events Committee, we're really glad to see you here today and looking forward to what's ahead of us. So without anything further, I'll hand it on over to Stephanie.
That is what I would call a very quick introduction. Good afternoon and happy Founders Day. I'm happy to see so many familiar faces here. Some of you I met last night at the Founders Dinner, so I'm pleased to see you again today. My name is Stephanie Rolph. I am a product of the Department of History here at Millsaps and now a faculty member in the Department of History. And Kenneth asked me to talk a little bit about the history of the college from its founding to 1945. So, stick with me. We're going to move fast. It is quite a pleasure for me to be able to share a table with these people over here, outstanding students, outstanding faculty members. I certainly am here to learn as much as I am to participate. I graduated from Millsaps in 1999 and arrived back here in 2010 as a faculty member. It was quite a surprising turn of events for me, I have to admit. My professors at Millsaps, some of whom are here today, including Charles Salas, Bob McElvain, Lisa Siegel, who is no longer here, and Suzanne Mars, who I'm sure many of you know, made such an impression on me that I started to imagine myself in a similar capacity, even though I was pre-law. I decided that this sounded like a lot more fun. Why not go to school for twice as long and make half as much money? So as I stand before you today as a former student and as a faculty member, it really hits me what a gift this has been for me to be able to claim both roles and to participate in a day like today that really celebrates this institution's history. As a historian of Mississippi history and a product of the institution, I thought that Kenneth's idea about a Founders Day panel was a great one. You should always be careful about your enthusiasm around here, by the way. So he gave me a pretty tall order. And in the middle of a traditional semester, it's difficult to pursue some research. So I want to take just a second to recognize Deborah McIntosh, who is our very own archivist here, who was able to collect some resources for me to save me some trips and to help me sort of put this together a lot quicker than I would have had I been left to my own devices. So this is really a product of the materials that she pulled together for me, and also previous presentations and research projects that have relied on the institution's history. So I have drawn liberally from those that have come before me. If you have any familiarity with Jackson's geological circumstances, you will share my amusement at a historical sketch of the college that former president and professor emeritus David Key wrote as a feature in the Millsaps College Bulletin in 1946. In his opening paragraph in that bulletin, Dr. Key described the, quote, stratum of marl, a bluish clayey material full of marine fossils that has affected the foundations of buildings that the founders thought they were erecting for generations. A fact that he explained, quote, played a part in the financial chronicle of the institution. So President Perigin, you're in good company. And I think we all sort of share the unique location that we have here. I know my colleagues in the Christian Center understand this. You never know what you're going to get. Oftentimes when I'm talking with my students about the ways that we pursue historical meaning, I ask them to consider the comparisons between motivations and outcomes. What do historical actors mean to happen when they act? And how does that turn out for them? And as we examine the history of this institution, I ask you to keep that question in mind, because the intent behind the founding of this institution keeps us focused on the progress that we continue to make, and it reminds us of the questions we have to keep asking ourselves as we face the unique circumstances that Jackson has, that Mississippi has, and also that this nation faces as we see events turn and we see ideas shift. And that really began in the 1880s with this question of how the Methodist Church could be involved in creating an institution of higher learning in Mississippi that would raise the bar. And those discussions led to the founding of this college. So it was a product of this growing desire to improve educational opportunity in Mississippi and to connect that with the Methodist Conference's mission. In 1889, a group of church leaders met in Jackson for that purpose. It was at that meeting that Major Reuben Millsaps pledged $50,000 to endow the institution, the first of many contributions he would make throughout his life. The conference pledged to meet this contribution with its own. By January of 1890, contributions had been secured and the name had been chosen, despite the protest of its namesake. And on February 21st, 1890, the charter for the college had been established. Its trustees were a mix of ministers and lay people, all distinguished in their educations and accomplishments. Among them, Major Millsaps served as treasurer of the board from its founding until his death, which was something that I was sort of surprised by. I didn't realize that he had actually served in such an intimate capacity with the finances of the institution for its life and for his life. William Bell Tamura served as its first president. He was a pastor and former vice president of Whitworth College. We can credit President Murrah with putting together the first group of distinguished faculty and setting the educational program into place. That first group of faculty were quite distinguished, hailing from institutions that included the University of Chicago, Johns Hopkins, and Vanderbilt. Students could choose to pursue either the Bachelor of Arts or the Bachelor of Science, but that was where the choices ended. No elective courses would exist until the 1900-1901 academic year. From the very beginning, the academic program at Millsaps was rigorous and remained so even when enrollments were at critical lows. Students referred to this standard as the, quote, hog law, a practice the faculty made formal in 1921 by declaring that all students were required to make 70 in at least 2 subjects each term, or risk expulsion. I like that. In 1926, intelligence tests were implemented to assess the quality of incoming students and assign them to appropriate sections of courses. Consistently, faculty and administrators for the college went to great lengths to root out mediocrity among their students. In 1933, tuition was scaled to reward exemplary work by reducing costs for successful students. 1933 also saw the beginning of the comprehensive examination system. You're welcome. It's worth noting that Millsaps was founded 4 years prior to the formation of the Southern Association of Colleges and Secondary Schools. The standards the college set were determined among faculty and administrators, not outside bodies. And when those institutions began to cleave together and set their own standards, Millsaps immediately was invited to membership. And I find that incredibly impressive at this period of time in Mississippi where education was consistently in crisis. Millsaps easily fit into these new national standards that were being set. Recognition in its own home state was also forthcoming. In 1927, after conducting a statewide assessment of education, the State Department of Education unequivocally declared Millsaps as, quote, distinctly ahead of the state's other institutions for higher learning. I agree. In fact, Millsaps remained the only SACS-accredited institution in the state after a wave of political appointments under Governor Theodore Bilbo rendered the state institutions unable to meet SACS standards of leadership. So if you know anything about Bilbo, this will be brief. He is one of our most outstanding Mississippians, and he was simultaneously progressive in some areas, but also very regressive in others. And he was a big fan of the partisan political appointment system. And he went through a wave with higher education officials, particularly presidents, where he wanted to install his own people in those positions, and that resulted in the withdrawal of SACS accreditation for institutions like Mississippi State and the University of Mississippi. So this left Millsaps in quite a distinguished position. The growth of the college, both physically and financially, drew from a variety of decisions, purchases, and donations. The City of Jackson, the Methodist Conference, and the Andrew Carnegie Foundation all made critical contributions to the college endowment and building projects, including the construction of a fireproof library. The purchase of Jackson College, now Jackson State University, in 1902, their campus, extended the acreage of the college to North State Street. When East Mississippi Female College in Meridian burned in 1905, the Board of Trustees and the Mississippi Conference agreed that proceeds from the sale of the property should go toward Millsaps. At each stage of growth, Reuben Millsaps donated money to secure the sales or begin construction for buildings, making his final contribution upon his death in 1916 of $88,000. Major Millsaps' death coincided with a collection of facilities crises that sprang out of foundational problems and growth in the student body. The initial science building and the first library were the most critical casualties of this crisis. The construction of Sullivan Harrell in 1929 and Whitworth in 1939 occurred at opposite ends of the Great Depression, a period of financial crisis for the college because of its dependency on financial contributions from its supporters. But the commitment to facilities development and the successful efforts to collect financial support made it possible for the college to serve as a V-12 Navy unit during World War II, a relationship that provided sorely needed federal money that helped the college maintain faculty and salaries. Again, a big fan of that. Millsaps' identity as a private institution, though, while it created these consistent worries about financing because it was not receiving state funding, also put it in a position to be a leader in pushing against state norms, particularly those that were coming from the state capitol. It enabled the institution to remain committed to intellectual inquiry and social justice as state institutions suffered from political whims and state mandates. One of the first of such instances came with the evolution crisis in the 1920s that stemmed from the Scopes monkey trial in Dayton, Tennessee. At the Methodist Educational Association in 1927, 1 year after Mississippi passed a law prohibiting the teaching of evolution in public schools, Millsaps President Key co-sponsored a successful resolution that affirmed the MEA's opposition to any legislation that interfered with the proper teaching of science. From 1926 to 1969, Millsaps was the only institution in the state that could legally teach evolution and assign books that held evolution as a foundational scientific theory. A few years later, in 1937, the Millsaps-based International Relations Club, founded by history professor Ross Moore as a discussion group for students regarding contemporary issues, announced in the student newspaper, The Purple and White, its support for federal anti-lynching legislation, an issue about which Mississippi's newest U.S. Senator and former Governor Theodore Bilbo. I wonder how pleased he would be to be included in a Founders Day presentation at Millsaps. I feel I'm doing my due diligence today. He had been the most vocal in opposing that federal anti-lynching legislation. And he responded quite swiftly to Millsaps' announcement, to this group's announcement, branding the college and its faculty communist and declaring its students woefully misled. Pay attention, students, in their adoption of left-wing propaganda. We've heard that before, have we? President Key responded by reaffirming the institution's commitment to, quote, the free exchange of ideas, facts, and opinions, and by the inescapable compulsion of truth and of wise and sympathetic counsel, end quote. The Board of Trustees answered Key's statements with a unanimous endorsement. Through the 1940s, small groups of Millsaps students and faculty really built on those statements. And they began conversations in exchange with Tougaloo College, a private black college in North Jackson that had begun to earn its own reputation for progressive activism and intellectual inquiry. These events were in total violation of Mississippi laws regarding segregation, and the rising tide of black discontent with the injustices that persisted upon their return from World War II made these interracial exchanges even more threatening to the white power structure in Jackson that was preparing its own organized efforts to stifle any hint of change. As I sit down, I want you to consider the fact that one of the things that strikes me about Mississippi's history and Millsaps' history within that trajectory is that it doesn't take an entire institution to agree on an issue for change to happen. In all of these instances, there was a minority of faculty members, administrators, and students who persisted in making their voices heard. And the great thing about Millsaps is that it accommodated them. It wasn't necessarily transformed by those, but the fact that it allowed them to grow organically in the classroom and outside of the classroom may be the most valuable thing we hold as members of this Millsaps community, that we don't have to agree, we just have to listen. So thank you for listening. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lewis.
Well done. No, let's leave it there. I wondered about naming this section of the program The Way We Were, but we couldn't get Miss Streisand to cooperate. I have a turbulent period to report on, as some of you will remember. From 1950 to the mid-1970s, war and the ideology of white supremacy were recurring challenges to the Millsaps community. I think it is worth reflecting on how the moral fiber of the college was tested and shaped by the ways these challenges were interpreted and responded to. In 1950, the World War II veterans had taken their Millsaps degrees and gone on to join the new middle class that had been created by the GI Bill. The student body of 1950 consisted primarily of persons who had been born during the Great Depression, educated in the public schools, and acculturated by the ethos, the prevailing ethos in Mississippi. These students would be asked by a caring and committed faculty, a demanding faculty, to bring forth their very best academically in an environment where a social conscience could be awakened with the development of a critical vision. War in Korea was a challenge both to the college administration and to its male students. The former were worried about the war's impact on student enrollment. The latter were facing a draft that could lead to infantry duty in Korea, where 36,000 Americans would die. By the spring of 1951, enrollment had dropped from over 600 in the fall to 420. That caused a $20,000 budget shortfall and was one factor ending the 14-year tenure of Dr. Marion Smith as president of the college. Smith was not helped at all in the least by the invitation that year to bring Henry Hitt Crane, pastor of the Chicago Central Methodist Church, to be the first speaker in the newly established J. Lloyd DeSalle lectureship. A pacifist, persuasive advocate of conscientious objection to military service, Crane had been invited by the Student Christian Council. His address sparked heated debate in the dorms and in the frat houses, and considerable criticism from the community. The board must have chastened Smith for this invitation, for the president would complain to student leaders he encountered on the campus about inviting that communist to speak at Millsaps. In 1952, Homer Ellis Finger, a Yale Divinity graduate and 3-year Navy chaplain during the Second World War, became Millsaps' 6th president, and he was the first alumnus to assume that leadership role. That he was without a terminal degree concerned the faculty, but his popularity with the Methodists of Mississippi proved valuable as he launched a $1 million campaign for the college that built 2 new dorms, the college's very first student center, and removed the policy banning dancing on the campus. We always had to go off the campus to do that. The Supreme Court ruled in 1954 that separate but equal in public education was unconstitutional. Am I being heard in the back? Okay, good. Was unconstitutional. Millsaps's conformity to the pattern of segregation not only was at odds with the social creed of the Methodist Church, but also troubled the conscience among concerned faculty and students. In 1958, the students of the Ecumenical Christian Council and the Director of Religious Life invited Dr. Ernst Borinsky, who was the sociology professor at Tougaloo College, to speak during Religious Emphasis Week. In his address, Borinsky stated that segregation was contrary to Christian principles. The Jackson Press responded with attacks on Borinsky, Robert Bergmark, who was the Director of Religious Life, and also on the college. The papers also reported on a meeting between Millsaps and Tougaloo students and faculty and published the names of the faculty at that meeting in the papers. Actually, meetings like that had been going on for 25 years. But now hostile and threatening calls were being made to faculty and made it necessary for faculty to take security measures at their homes. The head of the Jackson White Citizens Council demanded that Millsaps declare itself in support of segregation, as he did of the presidents of other colleges. 2 other college presidents in the area acknowledged their support, and one provided a theological justification for segregation. President Finger declined with a reply that we do not indoctrinate students at Millsaps, but we teach them to think. The board, however, announced that there were no plans to change Millsaps' policy of white-only admissions, which showed that in Mississippi, the ideology of white supremacy at this time could still trump any creed that challenged it. but drawing a line in the sand for the freedom to explore and critique worldviews and ideologies reassured the faculty and brought finger public support from loyal alumni and from voices outside of the state. But with the coming of the 60s, the social climate in Mississippi became increasingly hostile to ideas and to persons who did not conform to the prevailing ideology. As in the previous decade, war and race continued to be consequential for Millsaps in the 60s. In 1963, 28 Methodist ministers signed a document born of conviction. And I have printed that document right here. It's available for those of you who'd like to have it after the sermon. This document was written in response to a proposal by the Mississippi legislature to close the public schools and then to reopen them as private academies supported by state funds. The signed statement opposed discrimination, communism, and the closing of public schools. This was interpreted, of course, by many as a challenge to white supremacy. Some of the signers were no longer welcome in their pulpits. Others had their lives threatened, and none received the public support of their bishop. 20 of the 28 left the state and sought clergy appointments elsewhere. 19 of the 28 were either Millsaps graduates or had attended the college. The faculty was dismayed that the bishop voiced no support for their former students who were under attack. They addressed a private letter to the bishop censuring him for abandoning his ministers in this crisis. I think James McKeown also wrote a letter at that time, didn't he? Yeah, I found that out. You got a footnote in a book I read. Since the bishop was also the chairman of the Board of Trustees, that was no small thing for the faculty to do. By 1964, further decline in the social climate, reprisals against dissenters from the cultural norm, and disillusion with the prevailing leadership in the Board of Trustees, the faculty began leaving for a more positive environment. From 1960 until 1964, the college lost its academic dean and the chairpersons of the departments of philosophy, sociology, political science, mathematics, biology, economics, and religion. These were persons established in chairs of their departments over that 4-year period. President Finger was elected bishop in 64, leaving that chair empty, and the board was declining to hear faculty pleas to change its admissions policy. However, it soon became obvious that no person of character and integrity would accept an invitation to lead the college under the color bar on admissions, unless that color bar was abolished. The announcement of Benjamin B. Graves, a professor of economics at the University of Mississippi, as Finger's successor was followed in the winter of '65 with the statement that Millsaps would now admit any qualified student, regardless of race. The change opened the door for a Ford Foundation challenge of $1.5 million and a $3.75 million matching gifts, the construction of a new academic complex, not as it is now, but as it was originally, and federal grants for academic programs and scholarships. In that fall, 4 African American students entered the freshman class. The previous summer, the Klan had killed Cheney, Schwerner, and Goodman and continued to burn black churches. In the fall of '67, Klansmen bombed the house of a former Millsaps student involved in interracial affairs, and the following night it hit the house of Rabbi Nussbaum, who was to become an adjunct faculty member at Millsaps. No editorials against this violence were printed in the Jackson press, leaving tacit agreement with this form of terrorism. In the fall of 1968, the Interdisciplinary Heritage Program was introduced as an alternative to the traditional curricular path for freshmen. Widely recognized as a model for humanities interdisciplinary study, Heritage became a flagship program of the college. As the Vietnam conflict began to escalate in the second half of the decade, students once again would face college being interrupted by military service. Debate about the war, the draft, and civil rights went on both within the classroom and outside. The options of conscientious objection, flight to Canada, as alternatives to military service were frequent topics when students came for counseling. On May the 14th, 1970, the National Guard and the Jackson Police fired on the Jackson State Dorm. What had begun as a protest against war and white abuses became disorderly in response to a rumor that a prominent black leader had been assassinated. 2 students were killed, one from Jackson State, another from a local high school. That next day, Millsaps students marched on the governor's mansion, protesting the slayings. As they reached the mansion, they were met by students marching from Jackson State. The 2 groups merged, circled the governor's mansion, receiving abusive comments along the way. One person later reported that her experience on that march changed her life. That fall, Edward M. Collins became the second alumnus to serve as the president of the college. The early 70s were a time of budgetary restraint, Watergate, and bad news from the Far East. Both of the professors in classics had retired. The board talked of saving money by dropping Greek and Latin from the curriculum. And at the same time, the director of the Heritage Program, Robert Pageant, who had led in building the program and had directed it for 8 years, wished to go back to the English department, which was his base. Collins persuaded the board that a classicist be hired to direct Heritage and that funds be found to support the program now that the government title program was running out. The American Philological Association assisted the college in locating a classicist, Dr. Richard Freese, who became the new Heritage Director. The Hardin Foundation responded with generous support, and Heritage was renewed, and classics was restored to the curriculum. By the mid-70s, the Vietnam War was over, the Klan in federal court, the Citizens Council impotent in the face of civil rights legislation and government enforcement. But the ideology of white supremacy that had shaped attitudes and institutions in the state for 200 years continued to foster alienation. It was at that time that Don Fortenberry was appointed to the newly created office of college chaplain. His plan was that a team made up of students would have the task to discern and plan structures to address matters of the spirit and of social concern, of social justice on the campus and in the broader world. The campus ministry team was born and became a fertile ground for student leadership development and service both to the college and the church. So went those 3 decades. Thank you.
Whew, I'm glad we made it through all that, TW. Lord. You think about it, and you think, goodness, if we had to do that again. Well, if your period was that of turmoil, mine certainly is one of excitement and change, incredible change. I look out and I see students. I see Dr. Alford and Dr. Bernheim, Berlin, and I think, why are y'all here? Why aren't you in class? You need to get in lab. Yeah. Some of my colleagues, I think I look at you and I think, Marlis, I ought to be up here raising hell about some faculty issue or something, you know, or I expect Charles Salas to get up and make your famous motion that we'll vote for this even though we're not asked to vote for it and they'll have right to vote for it, which we did several times. But 1975 to 2000 certainly was a time of change, and if nothing else, I went from being 38 to being 63. Don't smile. That's a change. I don't think anything changes as fast as a college campus. 4 years ago, I was asked by the seniors to give the last lecture. And interesting enough, that was on, I chose to use as a title, Change the Ultimate. And now, not any of those students are here. The college has flopped completely again. We are one whole new community in terms of students. Now, if you think that doesn't put pressure on administrators and faculty, you better stay up because it's changing. But from 1975, beginning my period, Dr. Ed Collins, STW said, and his dean at the time, Harvey Sanders, towards the end of that period, there were several things that were done that brought about change to the college. One is that we elected to no longer require 2 years of language from each graduate. And so it was people who were then majoring in the sciences and whatnot no longer were required to do 2 years of language. And we also made changes, as I recall, in the requirements for math, the math requirements. And that was all done under the auspices of we would therefore be able to bring in more junior college people. Did that work? Probably not. But sounded good at the time. During the end of his period, Dr. Collins' period, for those certainly of you who remember old Bowie Gym, we tore down Bowie Gym and built tennis courses in where Olin is now, and then built the Quonset Hut Gymnasium, which at that time was really quite nice. If you hadn't been in there, the wood in there is beautiful. It really, truly is. Because Mike, you played on those new tennis courses. They were quite nice. He being Ed Collins, also was the president at the time that Millsaps brought in women's sports. And that certainly was, he elected to do that. We didn't have to do that, even though Title 13, I think, was in a fort. But we were one of the first to, in fact, to have women varsity sports. Now, enter the era of President Harmon. Some would say, what? Some would say the best of times. Some would say a golden period. But it certainly was a period of change. But it was a period that both the president and the Dean Bob Henning, stayed, and there was continuity between the administration. So we had stability, and we had stability of faculty members during that time. It was really a stable period. But there were great, incredible physical changes to the campus. And certainly many of you know of those changes, but you remember the street that used to run between North State and Northwest. And if you were going from Sullivan Harrell over to Murrow, then you better look both ways before you stepped on the right, because that was a thoroughfare. Then we were told that can't be changed because the fire department has to have a way to get a shortcut to get the fires if they're on, on the west side of the campus. Well, Dr. Hartman said, well, no, I don't accept that. So first thing he did was he put in speed bumps, and that sort of slowed things down. And then, of course, in later years, then it became the pedestrian mall over there. And it's hard, when you look at it now, it's hard to envision what it used to be with that street running right through the middle of things. It truly a remarkable change. But he brought that about. He got the money from the Olin Foundation to build the Olin building, the monies of the Eltz and the Eltz family for the Eltz School, and completely renovated, if not completely rebuilt, Murrah Hall. I was told, I don't know if it's true or not, but I was told last night that Murrah High School is named after Dr. Murrah, and I did not know that. But Murrah High School across over here, so some of you may not know it, but I did not know it. I've been here forever, but I had no earthly idea that was true. But it is, it is. So he completely renovated, if not rebuilt, Murrah, completely rebuilt Sullivan Harrell after we had renovated it in the summer of '63. It was brought back to its original construction and architecture. Built all the new dormitories, did the hack, the swimming pool, and then that wonderful facility. So the physical changes that he brought forth truly are remarkable. The enrollment in the 80s took a huge jump, so that we were looking at freshman classes of 350. And we started having conversations in the faculty as to whether or not we could go to a student body of 1,600 or 1,800, and if we did, how we were going to do that in terms of faculty and equipment and class space, et cetera. I've often wondered, why that great increase in students in the 80s up into the early 90s. And I think there were two things that one has to consider. Other than the fact, obviously, that we were a fantastic college and we were where you wanted to be, and if you wanted education, this was the place to be, and if you loved liberal arts education, this is where you wanted to be, et cetera. All those things are true. One thing that George did George Harmon, was to move John Christmas out of the Dean of Students office and made him VP for admissions. And that made a difference. He knew the state of Mississippi and Louisiana. And the other thing he did was bring Jack Woodard and it made him in charge of all the federal programs for federal grants, giving students scholarships, et cetera. He was one of the best in the country in doing that, and was recognized as being one of the best in the country. So I think those two things have certainly helped to initiate that great increase that we had. And of course, with the increase in students, then we had an increase in money, and that brought about stability, and everybody was on a roll. We had large grants that were given to the college, certainly the Olin grant, the Heron Foundation, the Campbells, the Moyers, the list can go on and on. The programs that were initiated during that period are numerous and many. The field programs, the business school, the MBA. I mean, guys, we didn't have that, prior. We had a business department, but we didn't really have a business school. And there was a lot of interesting conversation between the faculty and the president about the business school. The faculty did not go easy into the night. But certainly thank goodness we did that. One other thing you might not know, you remember in the early 60s when the Jackson School of Law came to Millsaps and asked us if we would take over the Jackson School of Law? And that was brought to the faculty. And in our wisdom, we said no. That was a mistake. It truly was. And why did we do that? Because as a faculty, we said we are a liberal arts institution. That is what we are about, and that's what we believe in. And if we bring in a law school, that is going to detract from that, and it will put monies into the law school where it could go, we think, into other programs. So we elected not to do it, and we probably made a mistake at that. The college, so we've started the law school. We started the business school, and thank goodness we did that. The field programs that were started throughout the college, biology, geology, archaeology, you name it now. But we bought the property in the Yucatan. And certainly that is added to the college and the offerings of the college. We have interdisciplinary programs into the Yucatan that include not only biology, geology, archaeology, English. The business school now has a presence in Merida. So that purchase of land and that decision certainly has affected the college greatly during the period. Certainly during this period, Dr. Fortenberry made the college and students aware of the importance of community service, which students up certainly in the 50s and 60s, certainly we didn't think about that. We didn't consider that to be really a part of the education, which it certainly is, and that is a great part of what students are expected to do here. And Don certainly was responsible for that, not only that, but the multicultural program that the college started. The initiation of the honor code was certainly a large step for this college. Not that Millsaps had not had an honor code before, we did back in the early 20s, and for some reason it was dropped. I would love to see a billboard. We need some billboards. But it would be honor students, honor program, honor code, Millsaps College, the honors college. Well, if you want to give $1,000 or two, I'll be glad to match it with you. You and I have already talked about some things, right? The governance of the college changed. We went from the time of Dr. Collins from initiating division chairs, and we had division chairs, we only had 2, then we went to 5. So we had division chairs plus our dean, and then we made a change to 2 divisions plus the business school and initiated associate deans. And so the governance of the college changed. The idea behind that was to get more flow from the faculty towards the administration. But that was the original idea that may have gotten lost somewhere along the lines. The faculty has enlarged. We brought in new faculty. We lost faculty certainly during the period TW was talking about, but we brought in new faculty. We added new people. We added new disciplines. My goodness, we brought in George Bay in archaeology, and before the 80s we had no archaeology. So the college went through those changes. So I could sum all this up. I could have done this in about 2 seconds by simply saying 75 to 2000, change, 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 change. But that's the way it is. And it has changed since I retired 4 years ago. And Bob, I'm sure you would say the same thing. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're running a little low on time, so I'll try to move through this as quickly as I can. First of all, I just want to welcome everyone and say what an honor it is to be here representing student voices. Again, I'm Daniel Kees. I'm a junior political science and economics major here at Millsaps. So first, I want to speak a little bit about how I ended up here at Millsaps. Funny story, Mr. Wilson, for whom the Millsaps Wilson Library is named, owned the box factory that my grandfather worked at. And my grandfather was convinced beyond the shadow of a doubt that Mr. Wilson was conservative with their checks. So he, in his mind, he owned a piece of Millsaps. He said, I'm sure some of my check has gone to Millsaps. So he was determined. He was determined for at least one of his children to go to Millsaps. And that was my mother, his youngest. And so that's a big reason, big part of why I'm here now. So first I'm going to speak somewhat generally about Millsaps, and then I'll move into more substantive aspects of life at the college today. So again, that's just a little bit of my story. Millsaps, obviously, as we have heard this afternoon, has a very full history. Our public service and social justice commitment, though, lives on. I think that's something that's very unique to Millsaps, is that we've had a consistent record of valuing those types of things. And this is manifested in our engagement efforts in the Midtown community, in various jobs and internships that students hold within the greater Jackson area. So I'm going to try to move this slide along. So that's just a sort of picture of Jackson. So again, we do a good deal with Midtown, and it provides so many opportunities for engagement and discovery, and it's a unique relationship. We have the Wellspring Civic Engagement Program, 1C, One Campus, One Community projects, club, academic departments, all do very different things, and they all exemplify to different degrees different aspects of social justice and engagement and public service. So an interesting thing about Millsaps is that students have these opportunities. I'm currently at an education policy nonprofit downtown. In the past, I've interned with the Southern Poverty Law Center, and I've worked in the Division of Medicaid. So we have a lot of different opportunities, and all of those come about simply from knowing your professors, because professors here, as we have seen, are so engaged with students, and they're so engaged in what's going on in the college. And that can have, benefits that you wouldn't necessarily get somewhere else. So that's something for which I'm especially thankful. So we do a lot. We do a lot with Midtown, and Midtown does a lot with us. These events pull people from all over the Jackson area. Everyone has a different story. So a thing that's really unique about Millsaps is our location. Obviously, the Capitol building is right down the street, so that provides a lot of time for internships and different jobs. It's where the action is, all the exciting stuff. UMC, the University of Mississippi Medical Center, is also right across the intersection. Baptist is also right down the road again, so we're kind of in this cool little triangle that provides, again, students with so many opportunities. We have a strong med school tradition, I know. We still have currently we have a 95% acceptance rate within 2 years of graduation, so that's pretty exceptional, especially for a college of this size. There are numerous businesses. Obviously, we have the Fondren District down the road, and that's growing every day. That provides more opportunities for internships and jobs and experiences. Sound like a broken record, but that's Millsaps in a nutshell. You get so many opportunities here. And two words come to mind when I think of Millsaps: the words resources and opportunities. Students take advantage of all on and off-campus resources in an effort to contribute to our surroundings. And this often leads to opportunities that we could have never imagined. So we get so many experiences that really do impact us in ways we couldn't foresee. Where else would I even be in the same room, let alone on a panel with T.W. Lewis? It's not something that happens every day. So I'm very appreciative for Millsaps' role in all of that. As wonderful and distinctive as these surrounding places are, no place is quite as special as Millsaps. To be sure, these bordering establishments shape the culture of Mississippi, Jackson, and our college. Conversely, Millsaps has undoubtedly shaped these places, and it continues to do so. None of this, I know for certain, would have been possible without the minds and spirits of those special few we call Millsapians. So with that, I'll sort of segue into our student voices portion, our Millsaps moments. And I'll just kind of talk very generally, very quickly about how the college is today. So like any college, we have student life is punctuated by athletics and various philanthropic and Greek organizations. But we also have other things at Millsaps that make us interesting. We have theater, music, cultural events, numerous forums and lecture series, so many things to keep students engaged. At last count, we had over 60 registered student organizations and growing every semester. And for a school of this size, that's pretty remarkable. Millsaps is, whenever someone from off campus, be it a staff person or someone just in the community, whenever they come on campus, they're always surprised at how active Millsaps students are. They can't believe that we're so engaged. Sometimes we say overprogrammed, but I don't like to think of it that way. I think we're taking advantage of the tremendous opportunities that we're fortunate enough to experience. So I'd like now to take a moment to cover what I believe to be the most important part of the Millsaps experience, which is the people. As has been emphatically stated here today, the students, faculty, and staff of the college are what truly make it special. Over the years, these voices have lent themselves to the highest of callings, the strongest of admonitions, the most unwavering support, and the heartiest of laughs. I'll start with the freshmen, class of 2018. I think it speaks to the value of a Millsaps education and to the types of students here that many freshmen were among the first to submit reflections for this event today. There were so many responses, I couldn't include them all, but I think these do a pretty good job of capturing what Millsaps means to all of us. So, our first reflection comes from Samisa Hoskin, a freshman, who says, "The opportunities and possibilities here are limitless. I could not have chosen a better school. I love it here." Another freshman, Anna Sitt, sort of expounds upon that in saying, "Although I'm only a freshman, I can already see the huge role that Millsaps has played in my life these past few months. Since coming to Millsaps, I have witnessed myself change dramatically. Millsaps has shown me that I am capable, that the opportunities are endless. If I want to become involved in something, all I need to do is try. That's what makes the difference for me. The opportunities, all of the doors that are open to me. I just have to reach out and turn the handle." Sophomore Tasha McGuire wrote, "Being a student at Millsaps College is unlike anything I've ever experienced before. The beauty of the campus and the endless opportunities completely won me over. But Millsaps is so much more than that. Every day, I find another reason to love this place. Millsaps has some of the most wonderful people in it, and that alone is a huge draw. I always joke with my friends that to be at Millsaps, you have to be a little bit weird." Which is true, it's very true. Every individual on this campus is so unique, and the mixture of personalities creates such a welcoming environment. Unlike other big universities, Millsaps allows an individual to be involved in a variety of activities and still manage time to study. Like I said, the possibilities are endless, and I cannot wait to see what the next 2 years have to offer me. Go Majors. Some junior reflections. From Trey Vernacey, our student body president, we have, "Millsaps College changes lives. It is as simple as that. Millsaps," excuse me, Trey. There we go. "Millsaps is a place where students of diverse backgrounds come together to learn about themselves, others, and their academic field of choice. Millsaps is more than a liberal arts college. It is a place like no other, with a faculty and staff that cares about the student experience and our education." Another junior, Alex Melnick, once offers a little fun story. "I once paid the band for Take Back the Night, a sexual abuse, violence prevention event, with only a six-pack, and I did so accidentally in front of the whole student body. I'm mainly proud of this because we raised close to $500 for Matt's house that night, which is a women's shelter, and I did it all with Millsaps volunteers. I also loved when I got Dean Katz to sing a duet with another student at a different charity event. So our administrators are fun." Now for a couple senior reflections. Madeline Calcote says, "I'm so happy that I was able to spend 4 years at Millsaps College. Since I've been here, I've become friends with some of the most important people in my life. I hope that I will always be friends with my Millsaps peers, even after graduation in May." Michaela Sullivan writes, "I appreciate that Millsaps teaches its students to ask questions, whether it be about Millsaps, controversial issues, and/or about our own futures. Having been given a safe space for 4 years to question my ideals, belief systems, and that of those around me has taught me to seek out an education beyond the walls of a classroom. My Millsaps education has been characterized by classroom lessons, internships, facilitating freshman summer orientation, and Jackson's evening summer shows. Senior Kate Ayton offered a fantastic way, I think, to sum up her experience. And I won't read the whole thing because we're pressed for time, but to me, Millsaps has meant challenges beyond my expectation, but challenges that I have emerged from stronger on the other side. It has meant refinement of skills, discovery of unknown passions, and the gift of a confident independence. I've had to take ownership of my beliefs and ideas, and I've blossomed because of that. I have made some incredible friends, the kind that will last a lifetime. I've learned a kind of quiet transparency, one that allows me to share my thoughts and know that I am in the safety of a community that accepts who I am and what I believe as a valuable part of our campus culture. And that's a picture of Kate. I'm sorry, Kate, I couldn't resist. So, those are just a few of the many student voices who were all so enthusiastic about sharing why they love this place, myself included. I believe that all these things speak to the essence of Millsaps, not only as an institution, but as a collective body, as a community, and as a family. I'll close with this little musing, my feeble effort to encapsulate all that is the Millsaps experience. Sometimes I dream of utopia. Sometimes. For many, college is a sort of utopia. It is a brief, dreamy escape from the world beyond, a place where students can explore and cultivate their individual talents away from the critical eye of society. College is filled with interesting people from all walks of life who help each other grow in a myriad of dimensions as we grapple with our world, with success and failure, love and loss, laughter and disappointment, all under the watchful, loving gaze of Mother Millsaps. The challenges we face here are not meant to discourage us or cause us to turn from our beliefs. Rather, these challenges are an opportunity for us to reflect in ways that help us grow into our best selves. It's a utopia, but not a boring one. The diversity of persons on campus colors everything around us, and it also brings a plurality of worldviews. Only at Millsaps can you start a discussion on liberation theory and end up on the parallels of feminist thought in Harry Potter and Beyonce. The short 4-ish years of college are few but full. We are challenged not necessarily to change our own unique and varied outlooks, but to more fully and deeply understand them. The places, the activities, the challenges, the people, the challenging people, all shape us in ways we cannot presently see. One day, I hope to look back fondly on my experiences here and see this inevitable growth that I keep hearing so much about. I want to see if my dreams became a reality. Millsaps is our utopia. Here, we can dream just a little bit longer. Thank you.